We're talking about the Prince and the politician. The Prince is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the politician Peter Mandelson. Now, he's in serious trouble because there is a wealth of exchanges between him and Epstein, and in particular, he's sending stuff to Epstein, and that looks to me like an abuse of public office. It looks like corruption. The bigger picture is that this is a grand betrayal of something that's very important to all of us. And what Peter Mandelson has done by palling around and, it seems, trading information with Jeffrey Epstein, that to me, this feels like high treason.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files, The Consequences. This is part 2 of The Prince and the Politician.
So we've done the Prince a fair old bit, but we haven't really got into the politician and the consequences for our democracy of this horrible, dark and dirty stuff and how ordinary people feel about it.
So we did do the Prince in a lot of detail, the former Prince, last episode, but shall we just sort of go back over what this means for the monarchy? You've talked about, obviously, our democracy as well, and we're in this situation in this country where we do have a monarchy. What are the repercussions? What do you think?
It's hard to tell because the story's not over. But it feels like, well, this is my instinct, but remember, I'm 67 and I'm a bit of an old fart. And I'm not a monarchist. I don't believe in the ideology, but I quite like the royal family. And what's slightly weird about
Is that just because you really liked the Queen?
Because
the rest of them, come on, John.
Yeah, I really like the Queen, but also I did a story in the 80s when I was freelance. I just arrived from the Sheffield Telegraph, and I was working on Fleet Street. I worked for the Times Diary, then Wapping happened, and I thought, I don't want to be one of Rupert Murdoch's stormtroopers, so I sort of walked away from that. And then I started freelancing for Time Out, and they said, do a story about the Royal Rat Pack. These are the Fleet Street reporters who were kind of like parasites on the royal family.
Yeah.
And I found them pretty disgusting. And actually, my sympathies switched in favour of the royal family and against the Royal Rat Pack because they were so revolting. The one exception was Andrew Morton, who I got on very well with, and I kind of identified him as the most interesting and the funniest and the most human. And there was somebody else came to that same conclusion, that was Diana.
Yeah.
Because pretty much at the same time as she worked that out, like, which one of these people can I trust? She actually approached him and said, okay, I'm going to tell you my story. So I got that a bit, but also, so this is maybe a generational thing. But there's bits of Charles that I like, that's funny. I like noticing what people, when there's somebody in the public eye, I'm interested in how people who work for them think about them. For example, if they're afraid of them or afraid of getting something wrong, I register that. It's an important thing. You go to Russia, if you say anything untoward about Vladimir Putin, you're in trouble. The king, completely different. I wrote a book about Navalny, poison survived, poison died, called Murder in the Gulag. And I sign all of the books. I've also written Kill in the Kremlin, but I sign these books, hashtag VPDFO, which stands for Vladimir Putin do fuck off. And anyway, I did a talk at this very fancy literary festival in Scotland. And at the end of it, the very posh bloke who's running the festival said, can you sign a book for our sponsor? Because I think he'd like to read your book. And I said, yeah, terrific. Who's the sponsor? And he said, the king. But it wasn't like the man was afraid of him or anything like him. And you get those vibes about Charles.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you're right. I think it's just that there's a bigger question, isn't there, about how they're funded and the control and the rights and just the way they operate in the country is interesting because I think I definitely fall on the side of, sure, they can be there like some of the royal families are in European countries, that's totally fine. I get it. It's for the kind of shits and giggles. I mean, to me, it's a bit like you have a king, you have a queen. Like, what's next? Are we going to have like wizards and are there dragons? You know, to me, it's so fantastical that we still have this system in this country in the way that we do, that I do have to say I find it a little bit ridiculous. So it's good that you're balancing me out, John.
By the way, hold on. I think it's ridiculous too. But I like it being ridiculous, and it's my attitude towards the BBC in that it's absurd. It's a dinosaur, but I quite like dinosaurs. I've actually got a dinosaur tattoo. But I also feel so. There's this weird thing that I think that Charles and William get it too. That there's too much foppery, too much money, too much expense, too much public expense, and they need to survive. They need to economize and descale, and they need to get rid of this guy. By the way, there was a very funny story, and I'm going to swear, so viewer discretion is advised, etc.
You've already sworn.
But big time.
Okay.
So one of the Royal Protection Officers said there's a nickname for him, but we can't give it. The woman interviewer said, "No, tell us what it is." I said, "Oh, so we used to call him the," and so the other word, which isn't a swear word, but it's a tricky word. Is the gossip is that Angela Rayner, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party, called Andrew the nonce. But she gets on very well with Charles, and there was an interesting diary story that apparently, Charles and Starmer are a bit awkward, and you can imagine.
Oh,
that.
totally, yeah.
Whereas Charles and Angela Rayner, the working class girl from Manchester, and the man who's now our king, really hit it off. And yet she calls Andrew the nonce, and I wonder whether she's actually called Andrew the nonce to Charles. You wonder, don't you? But I think they get it. I think that it should be much more kind of like the Dutch or the Danish royal family. Anyway, my take is, so long as Charles and William hold true to this point, the law must run its course.
Yeah, I mean, he's 8th in line to the throne. They've got to do something about that, surely, in the first instance.
He's well, I mean, like, if there are 7 separate killings, I think we all work out who's behind them. But no, I think, listen, he's toast.
Yeah.
And so what you do is he should no longer be in line for the throne. They should change that. That may require an act of parliament. Do it. But I can see him going to prison. And like for 10 years, I'd actually put a bit of money on something like that. There's a wing in Wandsworth, Nick, where a friend of mine has been, Chris Atkins, who used to be a freelance producer for Panorama. He got in bed with Bad Money.
Yes.
And the Bad Money did a tax
He's written
law.
a couple of great books, hasn't he?
And there's a wonderful book called A Bit of a Stretch.
That's right.
But there's a wing in Wandsworth, Nick, called the Hampstead Wing. And you wonder whether they're actually polishing it up right now. Who knows?
Who knows? Let's move on to Peter Mandelson, shall we? Because there's something very interesting about the story that Andrew and Mandelson are kind of two halves of the same whole, aren't they? In a kind of strange way. How does it work with Mandelson, and what do you think is going to happen next?
So I think that Peter Mandelson is a loathsome individual. By the way, some of the time there's an anti-Semitism here, so let's be clear. My accountant, who's a really good bloke and a kind of friend of mine, he's Jewish. He went to the same state school, but for a lot of Jewish boys in North London that Mandelson done, and he's always hated Mandelson. Mm-hmm. And so it's nothing at all anti-Semitic. It's simply that he's something sleazy and dishonest about him. And by the way, this is like his 3rd disgrace.
Right.
And I think the first one was in 98 because he got a help with a mortgage for something, £230,000, which was big money back in the late 90s, serious money, from a fellow Labour MP who's very, very rich, a guy called Jeffrey Robinson. And he didn't declare it. And it's exactly why you should declare things. It's an important thing to do. He resigned, then he came back, and then he resigned again because he was seen to have helped with a passport application for two guys called the Hinduja brothers. Now, they don't run the fucking Balti takeaway. They are billionaires, and he was seen to have assisted them, and he didn't declare that. There was an investigation, and in one of these investigations, he was subsequently cleared of all wrongdoing, and he came back again. Third time, the disgrace is complete and utter. But what we're seeing, and we can look at the Epstein files, this weird chink of light, this cone of light into this darkness, and we can see that Mandelson, when he's business secretary, is doing exactly what Andrew's doing. He's sending confidential British government information to Jeffrey Epstein, and Jeffrey Epstein is somebody who can make an enormous amount of money out of this. So is it possible that Peter Mandelson is being paid money by Jeffrey Epstein for this information? Now, we don't know that, and I haven't seen any strong evidence of it. But what is striking is that Mandelson is, he is a middle-class Jewish boy from North London, and he ends up with something like a £2 or £3 million home in Regent's Park. That's serious money. And the Financial Times have done some reporting saying that him and his then boyfriend, now husband, have got a property in Brazil, or it looks as though they may have a property. Now, once again, Peter Mandelson and his boyfriend, partner, husband deny all wrongdoing, and Peter Mandelson has not been charged. And we believe in innocent till proven guilty. However, how does this man become so rich? He's very, very rich compared to ordinary people. Mandelson is a much, much, much cleverer man than Andrew. No competition. He's smart. So it may be that actually the police look at it and they can't prove the money. But I think that there's enough stuff there in terms of the movement of information. This is confidential government information to make you worry. And if I was Peter Mandelson, I'd be worried. He did not look happy. Never mind the by-election, the big picture is this is gold for reform. They're all the same. They're all in it for each other. Therefore, we must be radical. We must move to the radical right, the radical far right, because the system stinks.
Yeah.
And I have to say to Keir Starmer, you're a fool. You should have listened to our podcast, Hunting Glen, and you should have read my book, Hunting Glen, because it's there in audio and it's there in black and white. I phone up people who are in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book. This is an old address book, but there's lots and lots of, essentially you can do traffic analysis. The more entries, the more telephone numbers or fax numbers there is for somebody, the more of an intimate they are. There's something like 10 numbers and fax numbers for Peter Mandelson in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book. And I phone him up and I say, hello, it's John Sweeney. You're in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book. And Mandelson goes, John, I'm terribly sorry. I'm on a Zoom. Would you mind awfully if you phone back in half an hour? I said, sure, I'll do that, fine. I phoned back straight to answering machine. I never, ever speak to him again. But what that tells you is I'm an investigative journalist, and when put on the spot about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, remember this is 2020. This is 4 years before he's made British ambassador to Washington, D.C. He will not talk to an investigative journalist about this toxic, poisonous relationship.
And isn't it? It's because he thinks he can get away with it.
Well, whatever it is.
Has no consequences for him.
He can get away with it. Maybe he thinks that, but it was foolish for Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, to appoint this man.
Yeah.
Given this dark cloud. And I could have told him, I mean, listen, don't pay MI5 to do this. Just give me the contract and I can vet these people very quickly. So like, are you in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? Why is that then?
10 phone numbers as well.
Yeah, give me an explanation. And what about these pictures and when were they? And I want to hear the explanation. And if it's not good enough, you're fucked, mate.
Yeah.
And what I was saying, and Starmer, I believe, is in serious trouble. Now, there's another thing which hasn't come out yet, but there's something called the Humble Address, which was as a move in Parliament. I think it was led by the Liberal Democrats, but whatever it was, Labour's agreed to it. And it's that there is going to be a release of all of the communications, including the WhatsApp messages between members of the government and Peter Mandelson, apart from those which will impact on national security. And of course, that word national security, or that phrase, you can do a lot with that. So it'd be interesting. But the people who are doing the vetting of it is not the government, not the Cabinet Office, but it's the Intelligence Committee. But there are tons and tons of these. My prediction is some of it will be very, very embarrassing. I think very embarrassing for people who are in Mandelson's sphere. For example, the health secretary, who's very ambitious, possibly for Keir's crown. He may be in trouble. Keir himself may be in trouble, because it's possible that some of this, in particular the WhatsApp messages, may treat Donald Trump not with the kind of fawning reverence that Keir does publicly, but dismissively. You know, what's the old fool up to now? Now, you can make an argument that this is a national security issue, i.e. that it's dangerous for our national security if Trump really gets to know what the British Prime Minister really thinks about him. That's a time bomb coming up, but the time bomb, or the bomb that's right here, ticking away, is far too many people will be tempted to vote for Nigel Farage's Reform UK, because they see the British democracy to have been ruled by a corrupt elite, and at least some of it paedophiles. And the problem with that is at least some of this story is true.
Yeah.
So this is a disaster. And I do feel, I'm not Labour, but I do feel the anger that people at the top of the Labour Party, people like Alistair Campbell, we've known each other for a long time. I wouldn't say I was his friend, but we've known each other for a long time. And there are many things I disagree with him about, Iraq, etc. But he's a good man. And the anger he feels to his old friend, that's real. And so the problem is that actually, and I know this because, I've been chased by the secret police in China and Russia and Iran and Zimbabwe. Let's not go on, but yeah, I've kind of like, democracy is so much better, but we've been betrayed.
Yeah.
And it looks so, and we've been betrayed not just by the politician, but also the prince. So is there anything left? Yeah, and I do think there is, absolutely. Our system is so much better than life in Russia, absolutely.
We just have to hope that the pendulum will swing back the other way. That's the only thing we can hope for. It gets worse before it gets a lot better, I think, always.
Yes, but for now, you can look at the people voting in the by-election, and I spoke to a couple, and there was one old lady whose husband died of dementia, and she just thought, well, listen, I'm voting Reform because I've always voted Labour, but they took away whatever the winter fuel benefits.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah. And
they're doing this. You can feel it. It's so. The consequences for belief in democracy, and I'm less bothered about it, but the consequences for belief in our strange, fairy story constitution, the king and the queen, all that is bad. And it's a real hit. It's a real hit.
Let's talk a bit more about Mandelson's special relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, because it's gross. It is really gross.
It's gross, and we don't have the whole story. But they're on really good terms.
Yeah.
So, as I said, Epstein calls Mandelson Petey, and at one point, Mandelson says, you're my best friend. I mean, really?
Wow, that's just so grim.
And again, so the problem is the timing of this. Is he a convicted paedophile at this point? But I mean, and the other thing is he said, hey, listen, the reason I didn't pick up on the seriously dark side of Jeffrey Epstein is because I'm gay. And I, my roommate
That's
at
unreal.
LSE,
Yeah.
my roommate at LSE, the wonderful Toby Rose, who put on the first panto at LSE for a very long time, was gay, and he's a really good bloke and astute. And
No,
the
it's
idea,
completely-
and by the way, I mean, like, my gaydar's rubbish, but my gay male friends, certainly, and my gay female friends, lesbian, they are far better at reading people than I am or will ever be. And they know stuff, and they pick up details. And I think that it's absurd for him to say that.
It's a disgusting defense to hide behind.
Yes,
It's just
and the relationship continues after the conviction, as we know. Now, not all of this has come out, but enough of this has come out that it's poisonous. This stuff, it's not trivial. After the conviction, Peter Mandelson emails Epstein to say, your friends stay with you and love you. And by the way, this is wrong. And Mandelson keeps on saying, he denies any wrongdoing. Well, sorry, morally, this is wrong, full stop. You do not say to a convicted paedophile, your friends stay with you and love you. That's wrong. It's just plain wrong to me.
Yeah.
But the other sense of the betrayal of him, so he is moaning about Gordon Brown, the Labour Prime Minister, who he's supposedly serving to Jeffrey Epstein. He's leaking information, for example, when Gordon Brown is going. Now, by the way, this is market-sensitive information because that will affect stocks and shares, British stocks and shares on Wall Street and gilts. Gilts are that is British government bonds and things like that, and when a prime minister goes, there's a change. There's a bit of market uncertainty. You can make money from this information. That's what market's about. And you've got to say, there'll be people out there who believe that a market, one definition of a market is a conspiracy of insiders against outsiders. There's your fucking conspiracy right there. Mm-hmm. So Peter Mandelson had this terrible friendship with a convicted paedophile. It continued after conviction. There is a question mark about whether he benefited serious money. Now, we know the £15,000 from that Andrew's partner at the time, Sarah Ferguson, got. We don't know for a fact about Mandelson, but the smell is there. All of this is terrible for our democracy.
It is, and I think to your point about people watching what's happening, you look at these people who are meant to have the country's best interests at heart. At the very least, even if you're not loyal to your prime minister, you've got issues with your prime minister, whatever's going on there, you should at least be loyal to your country first and foremost. Isn't that it? It seems that people like Peter Mandelson, Jeffrey Epstein are loyal to no one. They're sort of part of this elite class that is really just loyal to themselves and their bank accounts, and that's about it.
But what's crazy about this, Ruth, is that there's, the QAnon, which I did a video for Newsnight where I took the piss out of them, and they believe in this kind of mad conspiracy of super rich people and they're paedophiles.
Not looking too mad now, though, is it?
The information stuff that's playing, that's dark. So who's Epstein working for? So one of the stories is that Epstein is talking to the Russians.
Right.
So when Mandelson shares sensitive government information with Epstein, who's Epstein sharing it with? Now, it's one thing for him to give it to his rich guys whose portfolios he's managing. Okay, that's still a crime. But if some of it's going back to the fucking KGB in Moscow, the British Prime Minister's about to go, oh, the Russians would love that. They want to know. Vladimir Putin, the killer in the Kremlin, wants to know about that. So that's seriously bad. And I think that's very, very possible. And by the way, somebody smart on Twitter has noted that one people who don't pop up in the Epstein files are the Russians. Well, of course they don't, because they're aware of who they're dealing with. But what's going on there? And there's mention of Epstein talking about the possibility of meeting Putin. Now, it's a possibility. We don't know it's a fact. But did it happen? And again, you feel, what about our intelligence service? You know, what has MI6 been doing? What's MI5 been doing? Are they not across this? Is it all news to them? Or did they know about it and they didn't go there? My suspicion is that there aren't enough of them. And I know this from reporting about, for example, the Manchester Arena bomb. The long list of possible terror attacks is something like 20,000. These are possibles. People that have got to watch it too long. And so, yes, they missed the Manchester Arena bomber, but there's just got too many people to look at. So the answer is that they have to triage, like you do in first aid, and you can't do everybody. So they don't have enough bandwidth to go for that. Still, it was wrong for Keir Starmer to appoint Peter Mandelson as the British ambassador. It was wrong because there was powerful information from people like us in our podcast. We did Hunting Galen, my book, Hunting Galen, and loads of other people too as well. And basically, I think that when all of this stuff comes out, I think Keir Starmer will have to resign. It's the end for him, and I may be wrong about that, but I think he should go. Because he made a terrible mistake. You should not give an important job like that to someone like Peter Mandelson, who everyone knew was still hanging out the convicted paedophile after he'd been convicted. End of. And the reason he should go is because our democracy and its reputation is in serious trouble because of this mistake.
Thank you, John. We'll continue with the Epstein files, the consequences, in our next episode about Ghislaine Maxwell.
Thank you for watching. If you can, subscribe to the channel. It's criminal. If you've got a comment, please do so. It's a free country, at least for the time being. And tell us what you think. Thanks for watching.